sign-in sheet there if you're interested in signing in and getting any further correspondence that you might have that goes out. And there's also a comment sheet there that if you want to make any comments and leave them behind, you're welcome to do that as well. Or you can always email us after the presentation as well. So we'll just quickly go through what we are looking at here. It's the classing assessment for the Thomas and Constance Boulevard drainage improvements. So what we're going through tonight is the Public Information Center to keep everybody updated on where we are in the status of the project. We're going to try and give you a brief history of how the project has gone up until this point. And then part of that we'll be going through the various phases of the phase 2 and phase 3 of the project that we're looking at. And then how we got to where we are today. We had the opportunity with a new alternative that came up, working with one of the developers in the area that provides quite a bit of additional benefits that we'll try and go over here. We'll look at the design concept of that new alternative in some level of detail, and then compare that back to our previous design concept that we had sort of pro-offered before to solve that localized issue, and then take a look at the new preferred design and then sort of let you know what the next steps in the process are. So the purpose of the PIC is basically to look through the various design concepts that we've used to come up to the preferred solution once we've identified the localized problem that we all know about in the Constance Boulevard area with the regular drainage issues that are happening mostly every spring melt and every significant rainfall. And so we're in a middle phase here where we're partway between phase 4 and phase 5. So the first phase is where we've identified the problem. Phase 2, we started looking at some sort of bigger picture, what the potential solutions looking through the various areas are. Phase 3 is then looking at more detailed design options as we go through the process. And then phase 4 is to take all of those various components and do a little summary of kind of where we are at and what we've done. And you'll notice there's a couple of yellow areas on there. They might not be as visible on this slide, but we've got a thing at the back where we've had 2 previous public information centers similar to this. Of course, they were during COVID, so they weren't in person, they were online, but we had a few of those, and those were recorded and available online, similar to how this one will be as well. So we've added in another, now that we're doing an addendum, because there's some new information, we've added a third sort of informal PIC that's above and beyond the regular process to try and give everybody an update. So the first part of the project, we undertook the municipal class EA to identify a suitable solution to reduce the probability of flooding in the area of Constance Boulevard and Thomas Street, particularly in consideration of snowmelt occurrences as well as increased rainfall intensities expected due to climate change. So we had looked here at a broad study area, kind of looking at the different areas where we had potential to address some of the issues that we had identified, like the lack of capacity in the existing ditch, and other potential corridors that we could look at that time, looking at Thomas Street or Bayswater Drive, or other alternatives to Constance Boulevard, which is running parallel to the bay, trying to find a direct route to the bay. From there, we evaluated some potential solutions and design concepts and came up with a preferred alternative and design concept, and completed our addendum report, or the original report that identified the preferred solution and the preferred design alternative. And we're now at the stage where we've been working closely with the developer, who has taken the results of a number of studies that have been going on in the area. We've had this EA that's been going on. We've had the works for the Public Works building, that there's been some drainage study associated with that. And we've also had the town-wide drainage study that focused not specifically on this issues, but some other flooding issues on sort of George, Robert, and Maryland area. So sort of trying to take all of those different solutions that sort of culminate here and finish up some various field studies that we were looking at to kind of pull everything together and come up with the latest and greatest solution. So we had published an environmental study report at the end of phase 4, and that was posted online and made available to the public in December of 2022. And from that point, we've moved on now to create our new addendum report, which is the notice that you received for this meeting. And that addendum report, it's on the town website. It's a little tricky to find. There are a few hurdles to jump through, but we tried to outline the various menus and the 6 steps that you can go through, and we have a board there at the back. You can sort of note it down. That they're all on the various menus. You can get to the actual document and read through the conclusions of that, which contains everything I'm saying here tonight and all of the information that's on the board. So to take you through the history of the project, we had considered 4 main options and then 1 sort of variation on one of those options. And it was kind of looking at a sort of larger area, trying to increase the capacity of the boulevard ditch, trying to create a new outlet, trying to redirect drainage to a number of different other directions, whether it was towards the new channel that was going to be built as part of the depot works, or whether it was going to be trying to go towards Bayswater Drive. And through all of that, we decided that the best solution at that time was to investigate looking at the new outlet through the pit. And then through phase 3 of the process, we looked at the various configurations of that we could do, like whether we would be putting a culvert there and enclosing everything, whether we would have an open channel, and sort of what the footprint of that channel would be, whether we have a wider open area or a closed area. And we assessed the various impacts of that, environmental impacts, property impacts, and cost was a big factor, of course. And what we did look at there, or what we arrived on, was an alternative with a skewed alignment and a culvert extension. So we took the existing culvert that was under Constance Boulevard, and we were proposing to extend that with a larger box culvert and provide a maintenance road for access and have a total width of 9.6 meters. So what that looks like, here we have it in 2 different views, a cross-section view of the culvert itself, and then the magenta line, that's what the alignment we were looking to do. How we arrived at that sort of skew made a lot more sense for the property that we had available at the time in the existing works as opposed to going straight across the road. So this was a solution, but it was a solution that solved part of the problem, but would not really look at some more significant events that are sort of less likely to happen, but still very much an ongoing concern. So what we were able to do was we were able to work with the developers from Sunray Living, and they were proposing to do some work on their property to allow for development. And that opened up an opportunity to create a diversion channel that would pick things up sort of further to the south, directly at the water course, and direct it across their property and into the proposed channel that was going to be built as part of the Public Works building. And so for that, they did some modeling and they looked at the capacity under what we call the regional storm, which is the worst storm that is on record, which for this area is a storm that's called the Timmins storm. I don't remember the exact volume, it's like 160 millimeters of rain. It's a pretty significant event over 10 hours or so. And they set up a combination of models. And so what they had identified is that Beechwood Road, which used to be the old Highway 26, was sort of built over in a different time, and there were a lot cottages on the route, and there weren't as many people, and the design standards aren't what they are today. So there's a number of smaller culverts along that route that they felt through their, and were able to demonstrate through their model, that those culverts along a lot of the length of that road in that particular area were creating a restriction, created a lot of backup, and would create a lot of flooding. I thought those only happened when I was asleep. Did somebody doze off? I haven't seen it. It's a big difference. All right. So the culvert crossings there were creating a significant backup on the southern side of the highway. And as you can see from some of these results, color-coded gaps. And there's also a lot of capacity issues as we go down to the bay. So on the left, what we have is what happens when we implement a larger channel and improve the crossing at the MCO channel. You barely see the colors, but they're still in that narrow band that is down the property line, and ends up basically in the same little area there in the bay. And so it really offers a sort of an area-wide benefit and addresses both our target that we're looking at and a number of other issues in the area. So the details of that is that it's a 1.1 kilometer channel extending from west of the Bayswater Creek along the rear property line of 8859 Beechwood, which merges with our proposed channel from the West End Depot. The top width of that channel is expected to be about 18 to 19 meters wide, which includes a 4-meter access road. It will have a flat bottom that varies from about 4.25 to 5 meters wide, which is going to contain a sinuous low flow channel that will encourage fish habitat, because we are finding even fish in the existing roadside ditches that are out there. So we figured if we can create this, we can create an even better habitat and try and direct them to that area instead. It's a fairly flat channel. It goes from about 0.7% to 1.5% along the entire length. We're looking at 2 new culverts on Beechwood Road, which are 2 twin culverts that are 3 meters wide and 1,500 meters high. And we expect the flow depths in the channel to be about 1.2 to 1.3 meters deep for that regional event that I was talking about. So to sort of illustrate that concept, we have a couple of drawings here that were developed by the consultant that show some of the natural features that we have in the cross-section along with the alignment of the channel, and then sort of the basic dimensions of the larger channel in a couple of different locations. So the purpose of our addendum was to take all this new information and go back to our originally preferred alternative and try and evaluate it against this alternative to see how it fares on a number of different criteria that we'll go over here. And then we try and give it a rating ranging from positive to negative to try and give a basis of comparison to see which solution works best. So from that, we have the previous option, which was option 2 that we had selected, and now our current option 5. So one of the first things that we looked at, we wanted to address the problem statement of the whole exercise was to increase the capacity to try and reduce the flooding. So option 2 created the new outlet, which did enhance the capacity, but not to the extent that option 5 does, where it improves not only the flooding in the Thomas Constance area, but also creates that benefit that you can see in the illustration on a much larger scope. So then we looked at sort of constructability, where we tried to see how easily it would be to access the area and what sort of disruption it would create. Option 2 was feasible, but a lot of that work was in the existing municipal road allowance. We were traversing an existing residential property, so there might have been some road closures involved. There's definitely an impact on that individual property. And the advantage of 5 is that we've got a little bit of a work at Beechwood Road, but we're doing a lot of work through lands that are not yet developed, and working with developers in the area or piggybacking on the existing town project for the depot. And then we also looked at erosion potential, where they're basically, the two options are very comparable. There's anywhere that you've got any sort of bend in the route, water's going to resist that. It's going to try and go straight, it's going to wear out the banks, and over time that's a maintenance concern because you have to keep sort of reinforcing that area. But we did feel that option 5 is a little more of a direct flow pathway. We have a little bit more flexibility with the bends. They don't have to be as sharp because we're not working with existing road intersections where we've got a definite 90-degree hard intersection that we have to go through. We're sort of bending along property lines and trying to use momentum in our favor. And then we looked at the required footprint of the two options, where option 2 is slightly better because it demonstrates some efficiency in addressing capacity issues with a much smaller cross-section and a much smaller land requirement. But option 5, although it provides a better solution to the flooding, does take up a lot more land. So that involves a lot more dealing with the adjacent developments and trying to coordinate in with the town project. And then we looked kind of at the expected performance of those two, which are very similar to our looking at the capacity at the Constance area, and obviously option 5 performs much better on a much larger scale. So that's very positive there. And the existing utilities were a bit more of an issue for option 2 because there's quite a few utilities present in that existing intersection that we would have to work our way around. There are a few in Beechwood Road. We've recently replaced the water main in that area. And that sort of anticipated some of these works. So there's already been bends that have been placed into the water main to account for that. So we're able to work around those a little easier. And then the rest of it is lands that haven't been developed yet. So we have basically open corridors. Then we go from the physical environment and we look at the natural environment. And we look first at the terrestrial vegetation, and that's sort of significant species at risk and that type of thing, or whether we've got important vegetation communities. And option 2 was going to involve the removal of trees, subject to the dimension of channels, and some of those were quite mature. And option 5, with a larger size, requires a more extensive removal of trees compared to option 2, but they're a little less mature and they're a little less significant based on the results of our environmental study that we've done. The wildlife is fairly similar for the two. There's potential habitat for bats in both locations, but that can be addressed. There's a timing restriction for removal of trees during the bat nesting season, so if we work outside of that window, we shouldn't affect that community. There's plenty of other trees of that type that it's not going to affect the habitat long term. And then looking at the fish habitat, we had option 2 had some constraints because, as we said, there are some existing fish in the ditch, which creates some issues during construction, and there's potential for contamination through sediment, stir up, and that type of thing. Option 5 is quite a bit better for that because we are creating a better linkage to Georgian Bay. We're trying to create that naturalized channel profile, and so overall we feel like it works out quite a bit better. It does eliminate some permanent fish habitat in the area of the wetland within the development property, and we assume there will be less fish in the Constance Boulevard ditch, but there is still a linkage with Georgian Bay, so some of that may be hard to control. But we feel that we're replacing it with a much better habitat potential through the naturalized cross-section of the new chain. And the groundwater, very similar for both projects. We are not looking at a very deep channel, so we're not expecting to have a big impact around the area. Looking at the cultural and social environment, both will have a temporary noise disturbance due to construction activity. Option 5 may be marginally better, being slightly further away from some of the properties, but still probably a longer project in general. We looked at the cultural and social environment, which involved looking at the archaeological and cultural and built heritage, as well as the property impacts and potential impacts on climate change. And both of those have the potential to impact archaeological resources, but it's not a significant impact that's expected from the initial studies that we've done, and we'll be doing an additional future field investigation before we go through a detailed design, just to make sure that there are no important artifacts or anything that are exposed when we're in the area. Cultural and built heritage, the beach shoreline, of course, is very important in this area, very important to the cultural heritage landscape. And both channels could have a negative impact on that, but not in the long term and not if they're built properly. So we've incorporated a lot of erosion protection measures and that type of thing to be followed during construction that will get developed even more as we go through the detailed design of the project. And so the property impacts, we've talked before, the one, option 2, went directly through private property, and it certainly had major impacts on that property alone. Option 5 does have impacts on those properties, but we can work with the developers because they haven't been developed yet, and work with the MTO to create a new culvert crossing.
I'm sorry, I missed that. What property did you say it would have impact on?
The original property, I guess if we can go through the go back a couple slides, there was a configuration that we had selected where it was going through, I can't read the address there.
18 Constance.
Yeah, 18 Constance.
Right across from Thomas.
So that was where the original culvert was proposed.
Wasn't there originally one there and somebody built it? Sorry, I got it built in years ago. Should never been done.
It's hard to tell. We looked at some old aerial photos and we think that's generally the pattern that was followed, but there's really nothing conclusive. It's sort of, certainly the way the ditches and stuff are configured now, it did make more sense as a logical outlet than the current configuration. Okay, and if we go back. So then the impacts were climate change. We are, of course, expecting more rainfall over time, and so some of the increased capacity that we're getting out of option 5 allows us to incorporate the newer town design curves that are being used and incorporate that into the design of the channel, and provide some cushion on top of that. So, whereas opposed to the other one, we were limited by the available space, and we're trying to maximize the benefit that we could get, but we were still fairly vulnerable. The construction costs associated with both. Option 2, if we compare apples to apples, is significantly lower in construction cost, but the funding mechanisms are quite different. So option 2 would be funded solely under the town's capital projects budget, whereas excuse me, option 5 is funded by various sources, including development charges, cost sharing with the developers, as well as the town's capital budget. So we're able to spread that cost out over more sources. Operating and maintenance costs, option 2 was trickier because we had to get access to the property. It was an enclosed culvert that would require confined space entry to get into and to clear out. whereas option 5 is going to be an open channel with a maintenance access route running right beside it. So we felt that was positive. And so we ended up doing a cumulative ranking and determined that the new option does provide a better alternative than the original preferred option.
Can I ask you where the water from option 5 ends up?
Yeah, we can either go back to the slide or we can talk afterwards. We do have it displayed on the boards there. It might be a little easier to walk through it.
Well, let's go back now if you would.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So we can see where it was going before. This is kind of spread out over the various areas. And then it's a little less clear on this slide because it's just where the channel is there. You can kind of see it where it comes along there and then turns the corner and it goes down that property line and into the bay.
I just want to point out that actually for both options 2 and 5, the water is going to the same location into the bay.
Okay.
Just taking different routes there. With our option 2, it was going through number 24 Constance Boulevard out to this 18 or 24. I know there's the 2 properties there. Not sure which one it was exactly, but it's the same outlet location. It's just a different route to get to that same location.
And this is just some more details on the new preferred design. So with this, a new solution is to create the new channel to redirect drainage from Bayswater Creek to the West End Public Works Depot and Water Tower Outlet Channel. We're estimating the cost of that work. It's just above $1.1 million. As I mentioned, that will be funded from several different sources that we will figure out during detailed design. And then we just have some more details here regarding the channel section we're proposing. So now the next steps, all the information from this information center will be available on the website through those links that I've shown you, as well as the original report that we wrote and this addendum report are all available along that same sort of pathway. The hope is to begin construction on this in the end of this year. And what we're doing now is we're taking comments from the public until June 26th to find out what level of support there is, whether there's any additional features to be considered, or if there's any concerns that you might have. You can contact either myself at Amy Group, Richard Sloan, or Mark Taylor at the town. And we'll be happy to give you all the contact information that's also available in the report and online. So got that here as well, and it's on one of the boards. So.
Excuse me, can I just ask you, I apologize.
Yeah, no worries.
I was late, so I may have missed something, but where is the West End Public Works? Is that on Maryland?
Is that Maryland Cluster?
It's,
Is that the one you're referring to?
they're actually building a new road for it, which is called Joan Avenue.
When's that going to start?
Yeah, it's way.
Okay.
But where?
Okay, I see we're into the question period now. I told Richard I'd come up and help with some of the questions. The Public Works Depot, maybe you want to go back to that one aerial image. So as Richard said, we got to build a new road called Joan Avenue. It's immediately west of, I believe it's 75th Street on the south side of Beechwood. Maybe the aerial photography with like the flooding. Sure, I have a point. Less vertically challenged. Yeah, and in terms of when is it going to commence, what the plan is as Richard has noted, this new realignment or diversion of the Bayswater Creek will actually coincide with our stormwater management pond outlet channel from that that development, and we've actually postponed that development until we finish this EA addendum because we didn't want to have to dig the channel twice. Basically, that channel was already going to be built as an outlet for our stormwater management pond, and now it's just going to be a larger channel because we're diverting all this flood water from the larger area into that same channel.
Now, was there not already an easement from the town through Roman's property, right through the middle to the bay?
We hadn't solidified the easement yet. There was, they had a draft plan that was showing the future drainage outlet, but now it's a wider channel, so it's a wider block that we require. So we had, incidentally as well, came up with, we already did a registered plan through the TC Energy property. We were all ready to sign that easement, but then when this new opportunity came up, we just haven't finalized that easement, but as Richard said, we have been working with these developers that they are aware of the property requirements. So they're not formalized yet until we finish the CA addendum.
What's going to happen with the ditch or the current walkway that goes down Thomas? Makes the turn down Constance and then?
I guess I'll pass that to you. The existing Thomas Street roadside ditch?
Yeah, it'll remain. There'll be far less draining to it. Because a lot of that is coming from that Bayswater Creek, and that comes right into the highway ditch, and then that flow gets dispersed across that whole area, and then ends up just getting trapped there as a bottleneck. So it'll pretty much go back to serving probably what it's best suited for, which is picking up only the local drainage from that area. So.
How long do you expect for this all to happen?
Right, I started getting that. There was a question earlier when we're supposed to start. Once we finish this EA, we have to finalize the detailed design to incorporate this grandiose channel into our design for the West End Depot. And then we are planning to go to tender for construction this fall once we get our final permit from the Conservation Authority for the construction. And yeah, we will be starting before the end of this year. And in terms of construction duration, I'm not sure if we have that yet.
I don't think we have anything precise that we've determined.
Yeah.
It depends how it gets phased and all that. So.
Yeah, so the project's going to be more than just this channel. It's going to be, we have to construct Joan Avenue to create the entrance to our Public Works Depot. That means installing, like building a full road with storm sewers, sanitary sewer, I believe.
Yeah.
Water mains, street lights, everything else. We build that road, and we get the services into our Public Works Depot site. But of course, we have to clear trees for the whole site, build a stormwater management pond, and this channel. It's all going to be done under one contract.
Does the channel go right between Constance and Shoreline, and then it stops over?
Behind us.
Yeah. No, but I mean when it comes from the south.
It runs a straight line.
Okay.
Yeah, so this image shows what the water course currently does is the blue line.
Okay.
And we're basically taking that whole water course and bringing it. This thing. And as Richard said though, there is still a lot of water that goes to Thomas Street from this catchment area. Over here it's more local drainage, as he said. What we're converting is basically all the flood waters that come from the much larger area to the south of Highway 26.
How wide is the channel?
The top width of it is about 18